I am Jason Abraham, the Shadow Teacher 33, and a topic that's been somewhat at the forefront of the collective consciousness in the past 10, 15 years or so. A topic that's been back, that was hot many, many years ago in the 60s and 70s. And that topic is psychedelics. I'd say much of this topic we can owe to Joe Rogan talking about his DMT experiences on his podcast, and a topic that is so hot that YouTube started censoring it around 2016, 2017, sometime around then. People who were talking about psychedelics and their experiences were having their videos yanked, wasn't looked at as favorable content to advertisers. So we're going to talk about that very content today here on YouTube. And I want to hearken back to another podcast that Joe Rogan did. It was a podcast with a famous author, reputable author, Michael Pollan. And Michael Pollan wrote a book on psychedelics. And he was talking about that book on Joe Rogan's show. It's a topic that fascinated him. He wanted to dive in and understand how they actually worked. What's the mechanism of a psychedelic? I mean, I remember hearing people, or my mom warned me. I grew up in the 1980s where there were all these anti-drug ads, and my parents are fear-mongers to a point, and they were warning me of the dangers of drugs. And they said, Jason, if you take psychedelics, or I knew someone who took a trip and they saw snakes and spiders crawling all over their body. They never came back, warning me of the dangers of altering your perception so much that you never come back to good old sanity in the Matrix. And then you hear other accounts, say on the Aubrey Marcus podcast, of someone having an expanded sense of perception, having the sense of self and delusion dissolve, and feeling a greater connection with an expanded whole. And that's somewhat of what Michael Pollan talks about, the mechanism. In his book, he says essentially one of the things that the psychedelics do is they pull down a wall of perception that we have when we are going around the world in our conscious mind. We normally are filtering things out, focusing in on certain things, and we have this filter that allows us to focus on a very limited amount of things, which allows us to function in this world, what we call reality. This is a high mechanism of what makes us functional human beings. So evidently the psychedelic pulls that wall down. And again, when that wall comes down, some people see very beautiful things and feel this expanded sense of connection and awareness. Other people, when that wall goes down, they see terrifying things: snakes, spiders, demons, reptilians. And I'm fascinated by the whole thing. See, right now, I'm working with a client who had a bad stroke. So their brain was altered. And a regular thing this client sees is spiders. He sees spiders crawling on him. He doesn't just see them, he feels them. He perceives spiders. He sees elves in the room. Saw an elf on my shoulder the other day. And he's seeing all these different beings in the room all the time. And he tells me about them. He tells me about what they're saying and what they're doing. And again, others say, it's the stroke. He's seeing stuff that's not there. But for me, I wonder if this is a similar mechanism to a psychedelic, where a certain wall, a certain filter of perception has been pulled down, And he actually is perceiving something that's there that someone who's in their conscious mind just doesn't see because that filter is up. And regardless, again, there's a challenge of working with somebody in that state to get them to focus, to go past the spiders, go past the elves, go past the snakes, and focus on a task at hand. That's one of the challenges of working through. But I wonder, is there maybe something more to it? Maybe something more, and maybe these beings, maybe these fields of perception that we don't see, that we filter out, maybe they have a greater impact on us than we are consciously aware of. And maybe there's some messages there. But regardless, I believe the path of growth, the path of greater understanding, the path of seeing things differently than the structures of the matrix have conditioned us to see. I find that there is great value in that. Now, another interesting theme with psychedelics. I made a couple of videos on BitChute about this that nobody seemed to care about, but I thought this was really fascinating. Davos, the Davos group, the Davos of this past year, brought shaman from Burning Man to Davos. Klaus Schwab brought some shaman there. And this was talked about in a Bloomberg article, but nobody was talking about it. And I found this quite interesting, that the most powerful people in the world, the people who have such high influence on the power structures of the world, are taking this interest in psychedelics. Are they taking a trip? Are they going to be doing some holotropic breath work to expand consciousness? Or are they going to look at these as simply another tool to manipulate perception and profit off of? All kinds of possibilities there. And going back to what I was saying, is I do believe that in your quest of expanded consciousness, expanded potential of the psyche, that you got to go past the structure of the matrix. And I do believe there's actually great risk and danger with psychedelics when you are going into that field without an initiated experiencer, an initiated elder, someone who's got the wisdom and the relationship with the plant medicines. And so much of that I find being commercialized today, and I don't think that's a good thing. I think expanded awareness is good, but I think the commercialization of this sort of thing is a little dangerous, a bit of a spiritual bypass, and it's something that is sacred and something that deserves the proper respect and the proper approach in that sense. Look at this expansion of consciousness, even though we have these aha moments where a light blinds us. We get blinded by the light, and we are able to see life in a new light. But ultimately, I think this is always this process of showing up, process of doing our work, process of learning how to re-engage intentionally and effectively. That being said, I'm going to do my best to go about my day and do just that, engage intentionally and effectively. And I'm going to end this transmission, and I will see you on the other side.